I've got to recover. I got to recover. Nobody saw me. And by the grace of God, within a year, I'd recovered.
If you are like me and know that free enterprise is the greatest opportunity in the world, but you also see there are huge issues starting to arise, like why is mentorship decreasing in popularity? Why do entrepreneurs like us who love to succeed see people fail at the top and never leave true significance? And how do people like us make a lasting impact on the world? And is it possible for enough entrepreneurial leaders together to make a real difference? These are the blaring questions, and this podcast is the answer. Journey with me, your host, Christian. Together we will challenge the status quo and conquer our legacies.
Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian podcast. Guys, we have someone so special today, and we're so extremely excited to have him on. Today, he's a guy that actually his boss cursed him out. And he decided that he no longer wants to work for another man or woman. And he went out there and built incredible businesses. He went out there and sold businesses throughout the U.S. Insurance, mortgage, banking, retail distribution, marketing, accounting. And now he's going out there and for the last 17 years of professional and practical experience with over 270 collegiate credit hours, he now improves the business acumen of leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives through trainings and advisory services. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Big Al Darnell. How are you doing today, sir?
All is well, Christian. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and such a thorough one at that.
Well, we appreciate you being on, and we look forward so much to just learning from you, definitely from your experiences and where you're going. I know I mentioned just a brief introduction. If you would, just tell us, our audience, a little bit more about you, my man.
Not a problem. So I originally hail from Huntsville, Alabama. I went to Auburn University, got a degree in mechanical engineering. Then I ended up I started a cleaning business while I was in college and didn't really pursue the engineering side of things. Had an opportunity to move to Atlanta, Georgia, started a mortgage company with 3 college friends, and that was amazing. It was at right before the recession happened, so we learned a lot because the recession ended up taking everybody out. And then I ended up starting a candy vending company all throughout Atlanta before I got a job at an accounting firm just to kind of keep everything in motion. Had an opportunity to move to San Diego, California, moved out there in 2008, went back to school, got an MBA in finance. Shortly after that, I started teaching and started my own company where I did taxes, accounting, and business consulting. Mm-hmm. And then, matter of fact, I just sold that company right before Thanksgiving, about 2 months ago. Congratulations. And thank you so much. And moved back to Huntsville. Hadn't been here in 18 years. I hadn't lived here in 18 years. So we're starting things all the way over and seeing what the next business is going to be. So I'm excited about all of that. But I've got a wife, 2 gorgeous daughters, and thoroughly enjoying life.
Well, that is awesome, and to obviously have such incredible, experience from buying and selling, different businesses, creating them from scratch. Let me ask you this: where did you learn that entrepreneurial spirit? Would you say, were you just always had that urge? Was it during that time when I just said that, your boss, cussed you out, or was it just kind of like your mom and dad? It was kind of a taught throughout the family.
Well, you know what? It wasn't taught, but I guess it was more implicitly learned because my dad, he built houses when I was coming up, so we built houses with him. He had 4 sons and 2 daughters, so the 4 sons would go out there and do a lot of the framework with them, and a lot of the work that he did was for himself. So I didn't know that was called entrepreneurship. That was during the 80s and early 90s, or the 80s and the 90s. And I didn't know that was called entrepreneurship. I didn't know that was called being in business. I just thought that, hey, my dad's a carpenter. He builds houses. We build houses with him. But so it was implicitly understood from that standpoint because he made his own hours. He didn't answer to anybody. But it wasn't until college that when I was working at an IHOP in Auburn, Alabama, and I got cursed out by my manager, I just said, hey, screw this, I'm going to go a different way. And I didn't go to the internet, which really wasn't that super big back in 2007, 2002, and look up how to start a business, or entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship wasn't, attractive back then. What I did was I said, what can I do to make money without working for a job? I wrote down 4 different items. One, I was going to teach hip-hop dance classes, but I figured I needed to be formally trained before somebody would pay me to train their kids or friends. I wrote down the cleaning business. I wrote down maybe car wash or something that had a low barrier of entry, low startup cost, and end up resorting to the cleaning company. And then over time, as I kept, had successes and failures, that's when I started learning about entrepreneurship, and that's what this thing I was doing was, and I started doing a lot of personal development to try to improve.
Well, that's awesome, though, and because I'm always intrigued with individuals, experience and how they fall into, entrepreneurialism. Because a lot of times, we've been taught, go to school, get a job, right? And then all of a sudden there's something that knocks on our door and realizes that there's something better. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Now, during your time of going from one, building the business, selling it, going to the next one, keep moving. Let me ask you this. What was one of your biggest, downfalls, not really downfalls, but I guess really quote unquote learning experiences, biggest failures, but obviously a really good learning experience as well. And how did you kind of, overcome that, develop that, and keep moving?
Oh, my brother, I've got one for the record book. So here's the thing. I had the last company that I just sold, I had it for about 10 and a half years. So I started it from scratch when I was working on my MBA program. And actually, I did my whole thesis around this company and used that to help start everything up, and got a lot of insight from my professors and so forth in order to do it. But lo and behold, I'm thinking, all right, boom, this is going to be the biggest, tax and consulting firm in the country one day, and we've got to expand and explode and go and grow. So about 5 or 6 years into it, I'd say about 6 years into it, I decided to open up a second branch of my company in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, I know that sounds pretty random. Why Cincinnati, Ohio, if you're from the South and you live in San Diego? But it was because I had an employee. I got an employee through the Wounded Warriors program. He was a former Marine that was almost killed in a motorcycle accident, but so he had to kind of get into a new industry. He wanted to learn accounting. I met him actually through my church, got him through the program, the Wounded Warriors program. He was phenomenal, one of the best employees I ever had. He ended up having to move back to Kentucky. So we kept in contact and said, hey, if I'm going to start a second company and I want you to run it. So I started that back about 6 years into opening my company, and I put a system in place. I purchased, all the stuff, the desk, computers, printers. I flew out there, got a 6-month lease. We got put him on salary and started looking into the marketing. So mind you, there were a lot of other elements to this, but, I invested quite a bit of money in order to make everything happen. But I let him know and let myself know that I was only going to give this a 6-month run to see whether or not it would be profitable. But I ended up losing my shirt. We didn't even make a tenth of the money that I had projected that we would make. We lost a ton of money, but thankfully I didn't have a 1-year lease or a 1-year employment agreement or contract with my guy. And then we had used my office in San Diego to do all the admin. So my admin and IT person in San Diego pretty much serviced both offices. So I lost a ton of money, and the biggest learning thing I got from it was, number one, I did the marketing all wrong. I marketed in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is a concrete jungle, a very old city with Midwestern values and views. I marketed out there as if it were the same way I marketed it in San Diego, which is not as old as Cincinnati, doesn't have the same industries as Cincinnati. It's a military / beach, city, and there's a lot of, outside a lot of people that walk outside and engage with companies and so on and so forth. Whereas in Cincinnati, they need flyers sent to their house to see the advertisement in the newspaper and so on and so forth. I thought that as long as he went to a couple of networking events and a couple of networking events and walked around 10-block radius, that we would be good. But no, we lost so much, man. I don't even want to tell you on air, man. Look, I'll tell you, we lost like $30,000. It wasn't enough to like take us out, but at that point in time, that was enough to feel. But yeah, that was just on the marketing side. From managing an employee from across the country, that was another learning experience that I learned a lot from, as well as negotiating other contracts with the city. So with Cincinnati, it's in a tri-city or tri-state area, and with my guy living in Kentucky, we had to work out taxes in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, and there was a large learning experience. But yeah, so I lost about $30,000 in 6 months worth of time. I ended up having to lay off 100% of my employees and start from scratch. So it was humbling to say the least, but extremely educational.
And that's the whole point, and that's why I really appreciate you being authentic and being open like that. I know that's very tough, but I always enjoy, obviously, because obviously in the business world and side hustle, home businesses, we always so much we focus on what we've achieved, and we never focus on the things that we failed at and that learned and obviously built who we are now. So let me ask you this: when all that was turmoil and so forth, did you just go ahead and close it and then just focus 100% on what was already working, or did you try to come back at that later? I'm just curious on that.
Well, no. So I closed the Cincinnati office, laid off even my employees in San Diego, and pretty much became a hermit. Yeah, I became a hermit and started all over again. Yeah. So I had maybe 3 employees in San Diego outside of myself, and a sole manager operator up in Cincinnati. But once that happened, I had to lay off the 3 people I had in San Diego as well, my support staff and an accountant, and then I just totally focused on, hey, I've got to recover. Nobody saw me, and grace of God, within a year, I'd recovered. I thought it was going to take a little bit more, but within a year, I recovered everything that we lost. Well, it's not like I recovered what we lost, but I made up for it. Yeah. And then the year following that, I hired one person. Actually, I hired 2 more people, another accountant and another assistant, and then we just took off from there.
Wow. Okay, and I appreciate that clarification. I thought you closed Cincinnati. No, this was a total closure of the whole thing because that one move, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah, it threw me. It's totally off track. So I didn't close my company. It's just I had to. It was just me as a sole proprietor level almost. It was still a corporation, but it was just me as an individual running every aspect of it.
So mentally, after all that, and like you just said, you kind of went into like a hermit crab, just went back. However, though, within a year, you went back out there. What, and this probably has to do a little bit with your wife being a supporting, but I'm just curious, like, did you have like some influence from, third party that was like, hey, I believe in you, Al, go out there and keep doing it, or was that just self-motivated? I'm just curious on that aspect for those audience listeners that are struggling with whatever they're at, side hustle, home business. Is this going to create something? Is this going to develop something, or maybe they even, had a setback or whatever? I'm just curious what kind of kept going to reignite that spirit, if you will.
Well, I'll be honest with you. The thing is, I just hate quitting things. I just hate to quit. And the situation that happened was that I read an article back in 2008 or 2007 that said that there were 12 billionaires that were interviewed about success principles, business success principles, and they were all interviewed individually. And as the final question that was asked of all 12 of them, these were self-made billionaires, quote-unquote, self-made billionaires. It said, so if you had one piece of advice to help an entrepreneur that started from zero, just like you, to get to this billion-dollar status, what one piece of advice would you give them? And even though they interviewed everybody individually, each 12 of them gave the exact same answer in essence. And that one answer was, don't quit. So that was my mindset going into it. And yeah, my wife is an amazing support. However, because we use a lot of our personal funds, it was all of our personal funds, and not all, it was some of the funds from, what we had in the company already and some personal savings that we used to kind of, cover a lot of those losses. She was in support of me closing the business altogether and starting something totally different that she thought, may have turned out better. But all in all, she told me that, hey, I support you as a person. So even though I don't want you to keep it going, if you want to keep it going, I support you and I'll always support you. So that was a good thing. But no, it was just a thing in my mind of, all right, Big Al, don't quit. You can recover. This is going to be a great testimony, a great success story going forward, and just keep it pushing. And but yeah, that was how I looked at it.
And I appreciate that because how many times as business owners, as whatever we go through, how many times do we sit there and like, what, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to give up whatever, and I'm going to just do this, 8 to 5, or these small little things. And reality is like, if you just stay consistent, whether that be 10 years down the road, but if you keep staying consistent, it will happen, And so I appreciate that perspective as well. So let's kind of change gears a little bit. And I always, like I always mention on our podcast, we always like to talk about, some things that aren't talked about a lot in the business world. Anybody that wants to build a side hustle is mentorship, the power of mentorship, finding individuals that have the lifestyle that you want and basically attracting and basically having them in your life. Now, let me ask you this, Big Al. Do you have a mentor in your life? And if so, who would that be, and how have they impacted your life?
Well, I tell you this, I have informal mentors, and what these are friends of mine that are further along in the process than I am, that we have a conversation on a regular basis about, ups and downs. We talk about business. We play business games. There's one game called Cash Flow, and that's where we kind of talk about the ups and downs in business. So it's not so much a particular mentor that I go to and say, hey, this is what happened, what could I have done differently, but more so individuals where we kind of serve as each other, a circle of mentors for each other. Now, as I get into different industries, because I've been in such a varied amount of industries, most of them have been around the financial services industry, but some of them have not. But I try to find a mentor that's industry-based. So when I was starting my company up, I had two different industry mentors. One was the owner of the accounting firm that I worked for in Atlanta before I moved to San Diego. And he was a great mentor, would give me advice and then also fishing me some work here and there to do in my first 3 years of business. And then I also had another mentor, which had been in the tax business for, at that time, like 23, 24 years. He owned this 12-unit building that all had offices in it, but nobody in the office building knew that he owned it because he went through another property management company. But he was a mentor of mine, and I didn't take full advantage of him as I should have. I realized that towards the end. But yeah, I try to find industry-specific mentors, so to say, just so I can run things by them. But other than that, overall, I kind of have a circle of business friends that we meet up on a regular basis once a month or every 45 days at the latest. Yeah. And we kind of go over different lessons we've learned. And it's not just with business, but it's with everything success-oriented. Most of us are married, are having kids, from the aspects of investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, and with running businesses. We kind of talk about the whole gambit of just overall what we consider a success in life.
Definitely. Okay. And then I appreciate that, because, you may not have that, like you just said, it's more of an informal mentors, group of friends, individuals that obviously are successful in their own right. But obviously making sure, like the law of averages, if you will, the 5 people that are closest to you. Now,
exactly.
Going back to that one mentor that you said you wish you would have taken more advantage, how so? Obviously, you had that opportunity for some of those people that are listening right now that have, that mentor, if you will, but they don't know how to take full advantage. What would you say to those people, or how would you just kind of, going back in your own life, how would you change that slightly? What would you do?
Well, I'll say half of it was ego, and the other half was I didn't want to be a drain or a bother or seem uninformed or stupid to them. So the thing is I'm a big person on, relationships are 2 ways. I can give you something and you can give me something, or we just enjoy each other's presence. Now, crazy thing is that mentor that I was talking about has the exact same name I had. His name is Al as well, but he's like 8 inches taller than me and probably 80 pounds bigger than me. So he's really big Al, and he's an older Jewish guy, so he's got a lot of chutzpah when he talks, and it's very exacting, strong, tough, and matter-of-factly. So what I like that about it, because he's very direct, and he doesn't sugarcoat or beat around the bush or placate me in any way. But once again, that plays into at least my personal mindset of, hey, I don't want to call him and waste his time or make him think that I'm not trying to do my own research and figure things out. So that was an inhibitor, a personal inhibitor that I should have overcame, because from talking with him a lot more later on, he didn't do things like that. He thoroughly enjoyed me as a younger person reaching out to him and holding him in that esteem. And the other part was ego of, hey, well, look, I've been from a small standpoint successful so far. I don't need to run this by him. I don't need to ask him, so on and so forth. And because I knew that even if he told me, no, don't start that other company in Cincinnati or the other branch in Cincinnati, I knew I was going to do it anyway. Yeah. So that's where the ego came in. But the reason that I started using him a lot more towards the end is because that's where I started approaching the sale of my business. So naturally I called him, and boy, oh boy, he put me in physical contact with so many amazing prospects. He looked over so much of my business and gave me insights onto what could have been done better, what to present when potentially trying to pitch the sale of his business to prospects. And then he also kind of had a heart-to-heart with me to make sure that I'm selling it for the right reason, and that I'm not, walking out on something that could be much larger than what it is now. So I tell you this: if I were to have just had a meeting, a sit down with him like that, we met at a Panera Bread. That's one of his favorite places. But if I were to have 2 sit downs a year with him, I honestly think that my business would have done at least 25% to 40% better than it did. Yeah.
And that's interesting, because I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and I'm looking at these individuals, and some of these mentoring coaches, they know a lot, but they're charging 5, 6, 7, 8, 10,000 sometimes.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and you even look at like Tony Robbins. He charges $1 million a year to be mentored by him. And
wow.
if you have that money, go ahead. But it's like the power. I mean, what I find very interesting is like when you have multi-billionaires that spend $1 million cash out of their own business, out of their own pocket for a mentor like that, and obviously, and that's why I really wanted to dive down deep because, man, Big Al, that is something that I struggle with all the time because, specifically, and I think we can all talk for as men, you want to show like, hey, I know what I'm doing, but it's hard to be, humbled and being real authentic with another guy and saying, hey, no, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And it can
exactly.
breathe into my life. So for those that, struggle with pride, I think that's one of the biggest things that, pride and ego that really prevent us from getting the most out of people. How would you say, I guess really just doing it, but like what would you say to those people that struggle with that to really get the most benefit from the mentor? Because like you just said, that could have easily expanded 20 to 40% more revenue.
Yeah. Correct. So with me, what I'll do is I'll explain what I plan to adjust and change moving forward in order to kind of combat my naturally inherent egoistic personality and the bravado that I have, being a A-type personality and a go-getter, so on and so forth. But what I plan to do is to express everything up front and say, hey, look, I would love to have a conversation with you or pick your brain or provide some other type of value in exchange just to glean a couple of nuggets or gems of information from you. If it's okay with you, twice a year or once a quarter, and what could I do in order to bring value to you? Is there something that you volunteer with that I could volunteer with you as well? Are there certain people in my industry or certain interns that you might be looking for that can help you out in your business that I can help provide? Are there key insights with social media and so forth that I can bring to you? But to me, a big way of combating our personal pride into squandering out necessary help that we need is to initially present something that you can do for this person so that you don't feel like I'm just asking for a handout, but that I'm actually endeavoring to exchange value for value, because nobody has problems with equitable exchanges, but they do have problems with asking for something seemingly for nothing, just to sit at your feet. So that's my approach, to go at it with some level of equitable exchange that gives me more confidence with openly asking for a sit down or insight into what I think I may need for my business at that point in time.
Definitely. Wow. I really like that answer, just because it's just so beneficial. I think you're right on that. It's almost like what I found very interesting is like, you realize it specifically in entrepreneurialism. If I give away something for free, a lot of times that person will never read it, look at it, take it.
Correct.
But when all of a sudden you
Yes.
put money or time into it, invested that person, then all of a sudden you take it to a whole other level and you're like, okay, well, I want to get something out of this because I spent how much money, right? And so I definitely understand that, and I appreciate that, because then all of a sudden that whole mindset goes away, and now you're going in like, hey, I'm letting my whole self open. Tell me what I need, because I'm going to take advantage of the $6,000 I just spent, or whatever it may be. It may not just be monetary.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other things too, though, man. I found out there were two other informal mentors that I had that were much older. Both of them were in their 70s, and I'm talking about wildly successful. One was making tens of millions back in the 80s, and still doing extremely well and engaged in business for over 50 years. And the other one, he had schools in Canada, the UAE, Singapore, and the U.S., like colleges, I mean. And the difference between those two was the one that had, that was making tens of millions in the early 80s. He was trying to teach me from an aspect of, hey, look, young brother, everything that you need to do for me needs to be for free because what I'm giving you is worth gold. So do this, do that, do this, do that, do this. And I wasn't in a position I didn't feel like that was equitable. I thought that, hey, if I'm giving you this level of service, it's going to be worth more than just, hey, young man, do a 10 minutes worth of mentorship, so to say, because he wasn't that talkative outside of his own business. But what I learned in retrospect was that if I had did that, it was kind of like the Karate Kid situation. You know how Karate Kid, he didn't understand the wax on, wax off situation. He thought it was stupid. He thought that it didn't make any sense until after doing it for so many weeks, when Mr. Miyagi tried to punch him and he deflected the punch with a wax on, and then he deflected the second punch with a wax off move, then he realized that whole time so the first mentor I mentioned to you that needed me to do a lot of physical labor and manual work and for no pay, just for the privilege of listening to him for 15 minutes that I did not like, I didn't realize that it was the wax on, wax off type of training. Whereas I didn't understand that he was strengthening certain entrepreneurial muscles of mine that I didn't know I needed until, like with Mr. Miyagi punching at Danielson, with him deflecting and defending himself with the wax on, wax off move, then he realized, oh, that was the whole purpose of me waxing your car. So that's one thing I learned from that situation. And the second informal mentor I had that was in the 70s, the thing that I liked or what gravitated me to him so much was that he genuinely just believed in me. Mm-hmm. And he told me that. And he put me in position and introduced me to other individuals that were much further along than I was in order to help me out, all just because he genuinely believed in me. Yeah. And what we have to understand, or what I've learned, is that all your mentors aren't going to come in the same way, the same capacity, or teach you the same things. But if there's somebody that's been where you've been, anything, you can learn so much from them in whatever way that they give it out, or even if they don't give it out, but they just let you stay around them. So that's the only thing I wanted to relay about that.
No, and I appreciate you explaining that because, man, I see that so much, and specifically with mentorship, like you just said, is, we're so focused on all these other aspects, but when we really focus on, like, my gracious, the true power of mentorship and what's possible, and what I find very interesting about mentorship specifically is that when you're going through life and you're going through the system and, you're making those phone calls or you're doing, knocking on doors or you're doing all the handshakes and all the things, but you don't see any results, that's where a mentor can come right beside you and say, keep doing it. Don't worry. It'll create results.
Exactly. Exactly.
And like you just mentioned as well, having someone believe in you before sometimes you even believe in yourself. Like, can I really?
Yeah.
Can I produce this?
Yeah.
Am I good enough? Well, someone obviously believes in me, so I might as well just keep doing it until I believe myself, So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, let me ask you this, because, I don't know if, like, you were just going through life big out and then all of a sudden these mentors just showed up in your life, or did you go out of your way to, make sure that you fell in those circles so that you would meet those kind of people? How did you find, or were you very intentional with finding those mentors, if you will?
Well, no, crazy thing is just that most of these mentors I found was all through networking. And the networking I was doing was just so that I could try to, build the relationships to hopefully win over clients in my business. But in the wake of trying to do that, I met other individuals that were never clients, but became either the informal circle of co-mentors that I mentioned earlier, or these informal, more mature mentors that help me out in different ways, some indirectly and some a little bit more directly. But so what I did was I went to a ton of networking events. A lot of them didn't pan out. So me and that circle of mentors I told you about, we actually started our own networking event out there in San Diego. Wow. It's called Tasteful Tuesdays. It ran for like 6 years. We probably had 70 to 90 people showed up the first Tuesday of every month. And man, oh man, that's when the steam really started building and the momentum as well. But from that, a lot of people started to get in contact with us, and we were starting to get invited to other events where we were introduced to some of these people. And then I tell you, I love people, and I ask a lot of questions. I ask questions about people, and that's what opened up the door with a couple of the other ones as well. So just being out and about, networking, working. I also teach on the side. I teach a finance class at the University of Phoenix, and one of the professors was another person that was a mentor that I was mentioning. So I didn't go out and try to formally speak. And once again, my ego wouldn't allow it at the time to, matter of fact, actually I did. And this is back in 2007, I'd say, 2006, 2007, when I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. There was a guy that wrote a book. Have you heard of Think and Grow Rich?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, Napoleon.
Right. So Think and Grow Rich, there was another iteration called Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. And the author was commissioned by the original author to write a version for Black people, for African Americans, of the book that kind of keyed in on more of the hurdles that he saw in our community that kept us from becoming millionaires or successful in that standpoint, but along the same lines of the original Think and Grow Rich book. So that author actually worked at a university in Atlanta, and I was applying for the MBA program. I met that author, and I sent him an email, and we had lunch. I formally asked him, "Hey, would you be my mentor and teach me your ways," and so forth. And he told me, I really don't know you that well, and I don't do this much, but yeah, I guess you can. Just send me an email, and I'll respond to it. So I sent him an email a week later. It takes him a month to respond to me, and then I thank him. I sent him another email a month after that, and I got no response at all. I saw him again maybe 3 or 4 months later, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I think I remember you. You sent me emails? Oh, man, I'm sorry. I must have not got them. All right, you have a good day," and just kept walking. So I was really burnt by that whole situation, and I mentally told myself, "Listen to me, I'm not going to formally ask anybody to be my mentor anymore." And that's why I keep mentioning things about having informal mentors, because I had a issue with authority, so to say, and so forth. But yeah, so that's kind of how a lot of my pride got built up against trying to find actual mentors from a formal standpoint, and me just being a great networker and a lover of people and their stories opened up avenues where people would just, older people or more successful people would give me certain insights, and everything stayed informal so that they didn't feel bothered. I didn't feel like I could get rejected and so forth. So I guess at the heart of it was a feeling of rejection or not wanting to be rejected, that I didn't seek out mentors formally.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And that, that is a very sad story. But I mean, I get you. I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but I mean, I think people have been in that situation sometimes. They open themselves up because, you have to be authentic. You have to be real. And then all of a sudden, when you actually do, then, you know, you have your heart on the table there, and they kind of stab it. And it's like, well, that kind of hurt. And so you kind of pull back. And so I get what you're saying. And it's nice that you're still in a situation where you still have, you know, you still want to be authentic, even though it hurts sometimes. And, you know, I appreciate you being
But, you know, but the beautiful thing is that a lot of times that's the fuel that entrepreneurs need in order to succeed at the high level and to have the resilience that we have or whatnot. It's a lot of entrepreneurial fire is fueled by some sort of tragedy, trauma, pain, or hurt that have happened in the past, either to them or to someone they loved. And they said, well, guess what? I'll never let that happen to them again, or I'll never let that happen to me again. Yeah. And you become stronger from it so long as you don't settle in unforgiveness and resentment. I forgave the guy, and it wasn't like he really did anything to me. It's just that he didn't have the response that I had hoped he had, and I was entitled to the response. So that's why I knew I couldn't be upset. But I know you didn't ask in particular. But the reason I got in the mortgage industry is because when I was like 21 years old, I thought I was going to marry this young lady in college, and it didn't quite work out. But you know, growing up in Alabama, the traditional mindset or conventional way of living, if you get married, you got to buy a house. Man, I bought a house and I had the worst experience ever. I got screwed on 5 different sides, paid too much, emptied my bank account for a down payment that wasn't on paper that I needed, but the mortgage originator told me I did. The house had bats in it, so I couldn't live in it for half of the time. And then I ended up foreclosing on the house 2 years later. I bought it at 22 and foreclosed on it at 24 years old. So I said, this will never happen to me again, and I want to help protect other people that happened to. So I got into the mortgage business. The whole reason I became a mechanical engineer is because when I was 17, I bought a truck that I wanted to fix up and drive, but every time I took it to the mechanic, the engine would work for 3 months, and then it would break down. I took it to the same mechanic because I trusted him, and he was supposed to teach me how to fix it myself. I ended up replacing that engine 4 times, which was $500 a piece, and I replaced the transmission 3 times before I realized that the guy was screwing me over. That's how gullible I was. So I said, you know what? I'll never get screwed over like this again, and I don't want other people to get screwed over. So I'm going to go to mechanical engineering school. And then I had an issue with my taxes. I hadn't done taxes for 7 years, from 18 to like 23. So from 23 to 25, I learned everything I could about taxes and ended up starting a tax and accounting company. So the fuel for a lot of my entrepreneurial ventures were from some infraction against me, or trauma, tragedy, or mishap, just like being cussed out by the lady at IHOP because I was cleaning dishes and I dropped one of the dishes. So I started a cleaning company of my own where if I, you know, dropped a dish or messed something up, nobody else was going to yell or cuss at me or yell at me, but they might not hire me again for the next contract, but yet and still, you know, I made my own way. So even though I wasn't trying to deliver a sad story, it was just being like honest, but these things are actually, and these failures, like the one I had in Cincinnati, I learned more from that failure than I did through my whole MBA program. Yeah. So it was, you know, it's a beautiful thing.
You know, guys, for those that are listening, that is 100% mindset. The way Big Al just talked about that, where he said, you know what, all these negative things that happen to you sometimes in your life are sometimes the most beneficial things that can happen. And I know it doesn't seem like it, you know, but obviously, Big Al, like, you can probably, kind of foot stomp this as well, that this is who you are because of those negative situations. Correct?
Yeah, 100%.
That's awesome. And I appreciate, wow, that's incredible. So let's kind of just not jump ship on that, but like next kind of like modify a little bit. Now, definitely I love talking about the financial industry, but I really want to kind of dig down a little bit on wisdom versus knowledge. You know, and I really would like to figure out, you know, because I think so many people, you know, we read books. There's a lot of knowledge on the financial aspect. And, you know, we're just going to talk about financial because obviously that's your market. But let me ask you this. what is your definition of wisdom versus knowledge, if you will?
All right, great. Wisdom is just organized knowledge. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So let me, because it's kind of like, you probably tell someone, give me a good example of like where you see people that are focused so much on knowledge, but they're not focused on wisdom, or vice versa.
Great. So the thing is like a lot of people that go to school get a lot of schooling, and I know this just because I've done it. Where you're focused so much on obtaining degree after degree, class after class, course hour after course hour, or certificate after certificate. What they're seeking, they're seeking wisdom, but the way they're going about it is just obtaining a lot of knowledge. And before you know it, they have a host of degrees, a ton of certificates, and they look so beautiful on paper, but it's not organized properly. There's no order. There's no sequential aspect to it that allows them to have the impact that they hoped that knowledge would provide for them. So now you have an overeducated, ignorant individual, and that's unfortunate because their heart and their hope is so bent on trying to get the wisdom that's necessary. But the thing about wisdom is that wisdom has several different aspects. Number one, all wisdom has a foundation, and that foundation is usually based on an ethical belief system, a belief system of ethics. And when I teach in my class, because we talk about ethics quite a bit, especially with all the different things going on in the financial services industry. But ethics just means that you have the same response for the same stimuli. It's like if I can't tell one person that I charge $500 for a tax return, and then the next person tell them I charge $1,000 for the tax return for no reason at all. That's unethical. Mm-hmm. But if I have the same response, I give the same answer, then that's ethical. And what that does is it beats the aspect of what's right or wrong, or what's religiously, acceptable in your religion or somebody else's religion or somebody that doesn't have religion. All I'm saying is that you could have ethical people that are diabolical, henchmen, but so long as that they're diabolical to everybody, then they're being ethical in their mindset. All it is just having the same routine. But I forgot what the initial question was. Could you remind me again?
Yeah, mainly, and I think you were explaining it quite a bit there, is really just kind of like your definition between wisdom and giving not just a definition, but also the example. And like you said, someone that was in the, going out there and get a lot of knowledge, right, quote unquote, a lot of degrees, but then applying that information to your life.
Correct. Yeah. So the thing is, because wisdom always has a foundation, a base based on ethics, but then it's built on knowledge in a sequential order. And that's what I meant by my definition of wisdom is just organized knowledge. So it's kind of like, from the example that I talked about, having a lot of these degrees, but not being able to provide the service that those degrees state that you should be able to provide. Yeah. It's because no one taught you that in order to get to C, you have to go through A, B first. You just know that, hey, I know how to do C, let me do C. And C, even though it'll get done, it'll fall flat because A and B weren't done before it was done. So that's pretty much the biggest difference I've seen with wisdom and knowledge. And it is so impactful because I've talked to people that know a lot about taxes, they might know a lot about finances, they might know a lot about numbers, but they don't understand how it interconnects with everything else. And if you can read a financial statement, but you don't understand how that financial statement, how to make a decision based on that financial statement, then you have knowledge without wisdom, because wisdom means that you actually use those numbers to make decisions instead of making decisions independent of those numbers. That's the whole purpose of having those numbers, so that you can have a better guide, a more objective guide on how to make wise decisions. And that's a huge part of business acumen. Quickly giving answers to tough business problems, but answers that actually yield the right result.
That is incredible, and I appreciate that explanation because, man, that is so right. And I think so many times, oh my gracious, we get in such a rut of focus on knowledge. Let me read a book. Let me listen to audio. Let me, listen to podcasts. Let me do, all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, we've become a cesspool of just knowledge, but we don't apply any of that information. What I always like to look at is like this concept of you're a marriage counselor, but you're divorced 2 or 3 times, right? And like, well, you didn't learn, right? You didn't really understand how to really build a marriage. You just have that degree, and so that's where that difference is. And I appreciate that explanation. And my gosh,
what's your definition of wisdom?
Really, just that. I mean, just very similar to yours. It's just knowledge is knowing it, wisdom is applying it. It's the concept of
got it. Okay.
Knowledge is like knowing God, and then wisdom is walking with God. Does that make sense?
There is 1,000,000,000%. 1,000,000,000%.
Yeah, and that was someone I actually took off of a pastor in Alabama. We watch his church a lot. So, cool. So, anyways, I appreciate you being on. Guys, those that are listening, if you want to reach out to Big Al, how can they reach out to you if they're having, some mentor questions, if they just want to reach out and have a conversation, either financially or just other different questions that they have on their heart? How can they reach out to you, my man?
Well, the number one way, just because this is probably the number one network I'm on that everybody has access to, is LinkedIn. They could go and find me under Big Al Darnell Jr. on LinkedIn, or if they're on Instagram, I'm under Taking Over. The letter T, the number 8, and then KINGOVER. So I post videos on that, and then also with my email, you can contact me at bigal_allday@icloud.com.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, will be in the description below as well. So you can take a look at that. Obviously, copy that in your URL and reach out to them. Big Al, I really appreciate you being on, just showing your wisdom, your knowledge, your mentorship, your information that you were able to give. I've learned a lot from you. And, of course, I think our audience has learned a lot as well. So thank you so much, Big Al, for being on.
Hey, and one other thing. Number one, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for contacting me. Thank you so much for subscribing to my YouTube channel, which is also taking over. But I would like to encourage everybody else here to check out some of Christian D. Evans's YouTube page and some of his videos. And he's a magnificent teacher and coach, and I love anytime I get to learn more about making extra money. And he has a lot of information about side hustles and actually being profitable from side hustles, and side hustles that have a very low overhead because they're online, making money online. So I would definitely suggest you check out Christian's YouTube page and his LinkedIn page. We're connected now. We're subscribed to each other on YouTube, and we'll definitely be keeping up with each other in the coming weeks and months and years. And thank you so much again for this opportunity.
You guys, thank you so much.